Hola community, welcome to another episode of Blender.Today Live, this weekly gathering where we see what's new in everything Blender. You know, when there's everything, there's also nothing. And when there is nothing, I wouldn't do the show. I would probably invite someone over. This week we have stuff. We don't have many, as many as in other episodes because we're in one of those weeks where we are 3 weeks away from the release. Actually, let me double check. So it's the 16th. Next week, 23, then the 30th, and then there is the release 3.2. So the developers, as you may imagine, they are super busy fixing bugs, and the community are busy reporting them. The 3.3 development still going. Last week it was the last week of Jacques-Luc here at the studio, but of course it continues working. So there's planning updates in terms, and this week we actually have someone else. We have Lucas Stockner from Cycles development as well. So there will be news. He's gonna be hanging out here at the studio for 1 week. So it's pretty exciting. This year already, we had Clement, we have Richard, Hans, Jack, now Lucas Stockner. We had Sebastian Kunek for the motion tracker. We had all kinds of people around here, the studio. So and it just started. I feel like the year just started. I think we're nearly literally halfway in 2 weeks. So what do you say we get hands-on to see what is new in Blender development this week? So let's start directly with some of the features. So one of the we have plenty of areas. Well, plenty. We have curves, geometry nodes, modeling, UV, UI, outliner, performance, and a bunch of fixes that I like to mention because they are just as important as new features, you know? Some people even suggested Blender should have an entire release just dedicated to bug fixing. And even though the list of bugs is quite big, if you go to the metrics, the Blender metrics list, you find that there is a whole bunch of high priority bugs, which has been going down luckily since April. But still, there's like 26 reports, high priority, for example, and 16 bugs. I don't know if that deserves an entire release, but there is many unclassified reports that the developers have to, or the community can also help by going and seeing, okay, is this a real bug? It's not just one isolated case, or maybe it's an add-on that is making Blender crash, or you know, can be so many things. So yeah, there is room for improvement, but I think it's not. Is it that bad? Do you feel like Blender is unusable? Also, another funny thing is that sometimes when there is a bug, sometimes you get you feel like Blender is so buggy. But maybe it's just the one bug that happens on something very common, right? Like selection or something like that. And then you feel like the entire software is buggy. So there is a, there's variations around this buggy. Do you feel like Blender is buggy? That is buggier than it was 3 years ago, 2 years ago? Let me know. Okay, let's, the bug date. That's a nice name. Okay. Let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about curves. So the curves project, that is still experimental, remember, but it's going to be in Blender, and it's the hair system, the first part of this project of the new curve system project. This is going to be used by the hair system, and so all the tools mainly are around hair stuff. Like this one. Well, it could also count as curves, but it's mainly for hair. Why? Because, for example, this new feature, it's a setting that allows you to interpolate the points, the amount of points that there are in a curve, depending on how many points do the surrounding curves have. For example, if you're making really short hair, maybe you don't want to have 8-10 points per curve, you know, it's just too much detail. So you may want to have a part in your mesh that you or your mesh, or like for grass that you want, or maybe short hairs that you just only want like 1 or 2 points. You can choose those points and then draw on it, But maybe you started to do long hair where you need a whole bunch of points for the curves. So what happens now? Your setting is set to draw with like 20 points, and then you go paint on hair, and yeah, suddenly you're on your grass, and suddenly you have short hair with a bunch of points. Here comes the interpolation point count setting, that it just takes into account the number of points that are around the curves that you're painting on, and it just gets an average of that number and uses it for the amount of hair control points. So actually I can just show you. We don't have many things to show this week, so let's get the best out of them. So okay, I selected my cube. I'm gonna add an empty hair mesh, and in the curve, not mesh, in sculpt mode, which is a bit it's a bit weird, right? In sculpt, I need to go into sculpt mode to add curves. When does it stop being a sculpt mode and it becomes something else, right? Okay, I'm getting a bit sidetracked. Add curves. You start adding your curves, and you have these this points amount here in the curve shape that you can tweak. Is a fixed amount. If you set it to very high, it's gonna add as many points inside each spline as needed. If you in the interpolate section up here, if you select point count, then this will be grayed out, because it means that the this number is no longer relevant. It's going to be calculated automatically. Same with the length, for example, or the shape. The shape doesn't change anything, but the length does. You don't need to specify the length. So for example, if you have really long hair here and really short hair on this side, then if you just interpolate the length when you're painting in between, it should get somewhere in between. But I think it's the shape of this thing is not really helping. Or maybe this is helping. There you go. This is not too long. Yeah, I think it, yeah, there you go. Here, can see a shape. So it is actually, this is the short. It's a bit long because here is super long. So it works. Maybe the cube is not the most organic shape to demo these features. The next improvement is also related to the curves, and it's in the UI. So this new curve shape popover, it's this menu has also changed in other modes of the UI in the sculpting. So for example, what used to be, first you would have the name of the brush like readily available to change, and it can get confusing if you have a tool and then you can change the active tool name and data block. It's a bit too much freedom, right? So also it wasn't really relevant. I think you can still do it from the settings. So in the actual expanded properties where it belongs, in the properties, then you can change that. But in the header, where space is more precious, it really wasn't helping much. So now you'd find that you get more space available, more room for activities here in the header. There is also the fall off popover that contains the curve preset and all that info in one. The curve shape and the preset is all in one popover, and the same with other areas as well. I think it has one. In the delete curves has been removed. In this brush, the snake hook, it's the same concept of having a fall off, and then the curve shape. Yeah, I think we could even make this smaller, like the sphere and projected type of painting. Spheres like a 3D painting, a 3D brush, and projected is just like a 2D from the camera view, from the viewpoint. Those could be icons. I think if we made icons that are easy to recognize, we could use that here, because it's a toggle that is pretty much everywhere. It's like the add remove, the plus and minus setting. Chical, what do you think? Okay, the next change, it's an operator to convert the hair particle system, so the old system, it's not really old, still around, it's actually never been removed, but it's the old system to the new curve system. And there is already an operator to the other way around, where you can have the new curves into the old system, so it should be interchangeable. You can go back and forth, and this is very important because since you can convert the new hair curves into the old system for rendering, for example, the new hair is not ready to be rendered yet, but it's being worked on. It's good that you can go back. Next, I think that's all for the curve stuff. And then, okay, geometry nodes is kind of related to this because geometry nodes are also supported in curve objects. They have a new icon. You may have heard the news if you follow the social media, Blender on social media. We posted this last week together with a blog post that Dalai wrote, where he goes and explains in detail how the new icon came to be, which I'm pretty happy with. This kind of behind the scenes on such a small thing like an icon, right? Like the idea of the icon was just mainly to have something that is not the default node group icon, because node groups are one thing, but node groups can have types: shader, compositor, texture, or geometry nodes. So it needed its own icon. And the other type of node trees, like compositing, node textures, and shading, they don't have like a node on their design, so it didn't really make any sense. So yeah, there is a good exploration, and in the end ended up being a little bit, there's also some options that we had here, and and ended up being something like this. I like it. It's like a falling star, like the boring long name says here in the chat. It's not boring, by the way, your name, it's just long. But also it's like I don't know, like a meteorite, like something like has like a motion as well. And some people refer to it as particles, but yeah, you can distribute points, and eventually the particle system is going to be replaced with this kind of geometry node stuff. So, and also the very first use case was to distribute points. Also, if you're distributing points today in Blender, you are likely, unless you follow all tutorials, you're likely going to use geometry nodes because it's way more flexible than the old particle system, which can also flicker, it's not very stable, it doesn't have Poisson disk distribution and all that. So yeah. And also, it's just a small thing. Come on, it's mainly just so you can find it here in the list more easily. So if I make this slightly bigger for the live stream, you can find that it's now much easier to spot between the shader editor and the texture node editor. Okay. Hector Rojo, why is the new hair system not coming to 3.2? Because 3.2 comes out in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And the hair system, as you can see, doesn't even have edit mode. It doesn't have, like in edit mode, you can't select anything. There's no tools in edit mode. It only has some tools in sculpt mode. It's not ready for prime time. And also, again, beta 3.2 beta means there's no new features. It's just bug fixing. So yeah, that's why. Next, what else? Let's talk a little bit about modeling. There's just one feature in modeling slash, yeah, I think it's modeling. There is a new, when you're just using Blender in general, there is a new, and for example, if you're using Blender and you want to make this cylinder smooth here on the sides but flat here and sharp in the edges, you will usually turn on the beloved auto smooth. It's here, auto smooth. You turn it on. First you need to set it on, and that's how you like make it shade smooth, and then auto smooth, and that's what will make these faces look fine. Now there is an entry in the menu. So you right click, shade also smooth, and it will turn on shade smooth and this setting here, which comes in pretty handy because it means that you can have multiple, if you want to have make that operation in multiple objects, for example, now you can instead of just shade smooth and then going here and then picking somewhere the normals and then press alt or copy to selected to copy to everything, you can just right click, shade auto smooth, and in this panel here on the bottom left you can now also specify the angle, so you can change the angle in multiple objects after the case without actually, even on full screen, without actually having to go to the to the settings. This has been requested for so long by the community. It's I found this, well, many years ago, and I found it on right click select more recently again, so I decided to give it a go. I already had a patch in the past, but I decided to give it a go with my non-developer skills, but basically copying from what I can learn from other developers. And if you look at the code, it's also very, very simple, really. It's just a property in the operator. So it's yeah, there is a flag that you set, and if you look at the code, you can get an idea of how simple some things are code-wise, and someone that is not a developer, like myself, can give it a try and learn in the process, because when you get code reviews, the developers can give you feedback and you learn and you make good stuff for everybody, not just an add-on that gets lost somewhere. You just make a patch that becomes part of Blender. It's open source forever and ever. Okay, next. And that goes to people saying that right-click selects are places for proposals to die. No. I spend a lot of time, and I know Jeroen also spends time there, and Hans spends time there. Many developers also check it out. It's just that not every feature is as easy to implement, or it's part of the plan. All right. Let's go to the next section. It's the UV/texturing section. UDIMs can now be packed in, when you pack blend file, now you can pack UDIMs as well. So add support for packing inside files. This feature by Jesse mentions that this completes the support for tile texture packing on the Blender/cycles side of things. Most of these changes fall into one of the three categories: updating the image handling code, updating cycles to handle tile textures, and open shading language to properly handle texture. Even open shading language, that's cool. So yeah, now you can pack your textures, your UDIM textures. Thanks for the love in the chat. Pablo, are you sitting or standing? I am sitting. No, I'm standing. I make sure during the day I try to spend half the time sitting, half the time standing. And I know I'm going to spend a long day, 1 hour at least here in this live stream. So during the day, I sit down and then stand up. It's important to alternate. It's not good to sit down for too long. It's also not good to stand up for too long. So next. Undo improvements in texture painting. So now combining texture painting and image painting, texture painting inside of the sculpt mode should work better and faster, by judging at least by this video by Jeroen. So undo steps back and forth, and I guess redo steps as well. So yeah. We should eventually support undo for color filtering and other nodes. We might need to place it into its own compile and unit so more brushes can invoke the same code. So yeah, more improvements coming here. Not squatting, no. I will be sweating. It's pretty warm here. It's raining, but it's warm in the Netherlands. Next feature is an experiment. It's a UI. Well, let's just move into potpourri. Today is like a one big potpourri. Actually, I didn't know what to name the show today because just a bit of everything. There is a new experimental setting that was actually enabled permanently, but like it was just enabled. It was a change that allows Eevee to render, but the UI in Blender to be still responsive. You may have noticed that in the past, if you render with Eevee, everything else will be locked, like the UI will be locked. So not too long ago, there was a change that allowed the UI to be still responsive. However, it didn't work in all setups. Some people were reporting regressions that there will be like black screens while rendering instead of just updating the UI, or sometimes even just like flicker. So yeah, not ideal. So that change has been reverted and moved into a, well, not reverted, it has been just moved into an experimental setting that you can enable in the experimental section, I guess. Draw manager locking, there you go. This guy, the button. Cool. Let's continue. The next change is in the outliner. So the outliner has two changes and two removals. That's why I like to mention, because they one of them, I think it was a needed change. So actually, it hits home because I used this for hacks basically for so long. The outliner used to have, especially if you work in production, the outliner since forever. I remember using this in Sintel in 2010, 2009, 2010. In Blender 2.50, the outliner has an used to have a setting to rename a library path. So you could, well, sometimes it was the only way to fix things, or like to make sure, or yeah, make sure you had the right path. Even you could do really messy things, like the path could not exist, but you could have it there, and sometimes you would save Blender, and if you didn't restart Blender, you could keep that path, so you could change it around. It was really hacky, it was prone to errors, and it just doesn't belong in with now there are tools for making this better. So rename library, has been removed. This operator is no longer there because now there is actually a relocate operation. So when you rename a library path, you usually want to give it a different blend file, a different file library to come from. So there you can use the relocate operation, which actually is going to go through all the trouble of finding the right data blocks and doing all the work under the hood. And also, you don't need to save Blender and reload. I actually have in my add-on Amaranth, I have to remove this feature now. In Amaranth, I had this is my add-on that I use in production stuff. In file, there is a change, a setting, an operator called save and reload. Imagine how often this hack had to be made of, yeah, saving and reloading, save, reload, save, that I made an operator for it, and I even added a shortcut. How evil is that? I need to change that for people using Amaranth. I think I'm gonna get rid of that feature, because in the Blender file, in the library section, when you actually have things linked, you can resync, reload, relocate, everything without closing and opening Blender again. So that is no longer needed. Another feature that was removed, and there are already reports of people actually wanting it back, and I think it should be revisited, because it's the remap data block usages. It's a very advanced feature that allows you to do crazy things, to remap from one data block or from many data blocks into another. This operation was exposed with an entry called remap users in the right click menu of the outliner. So really exposed, and you could mess up things with that. The API for it, the Python side of things, hasn't been removed. It's still there, the Python API. So if you have scripts doing this crazy stuff, you can still use them. But there's no longer an entry in the menu, in the right click of the outliner. Do you miss the thing? The day after, on May 12th, there was already a report about this missing, and there also on right click select there is someone mentioning it, I think, already, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I think the feature, it's more used than we think, so raise your voice when things like that happen, and not just because something has been removed, but give examples of use cases. We are in Beacon 1, this is 3.3. They still have, we have 4 more months. September is when 3.3 comes out. So plenty of time. But share if you use this feature, by the way. Okay, another improvement in performance. The OBJ importer is more performant as on Windows. The Windows version has a bit of improvement. For example, the monkey has been improved from 1.25 seconds to 0.85. The other file, like the splash scene, Blender.Today splash scene, which is pretty large, it got 4 seconds improvement from 49 to 45. So it's not gonna give you a whole extra day. It's not gonna make your life longer. But it's always welcome. Okay, let's talk a little bit about fixes. So new features are great, but have you tried bug fixes? Such as, have you noticed in the new caustics in 3.2, actually this fix is in 3.2 as well. If you had a really rough type of surface like a glass and you enable the new caustics in cycles, you would get this kind of blocky shadow effects. This has been fixed. So if you run into this issue, rest assured that now it should look properly. But also, this is a very good example of a good bug report. It's super simple, 2 lines and images. Blocky caustics start at around 0.4. They are too sharp also. And the blend file. Super simple, easy to detect, easy for the developers to debug. So thank you, Viakeslav, for making such a good bug report, and congrats on getting it fixed for 3.2. Another fix in color management, it's actually more than a fix, it's features as well for image saving. So when you save an image, there are changes in color management. So one of them is respect the image file color space setting for saving in various cases where it was previously ignored. Blender will ignore the color management in some cases when you were saving an image. Previously, it would often use the sRGB instead of or linear color space, even when it was not selected. So AI, but done wrong. He would take decisions for you, but not probably the ones you wanted. Except a few times. You know, that's a cool thing about probability. Sometimes can go well. How can go the way you want. All right. Next, for the save as image operator, add a new color space option in the file browser to choose the color space of the file. Really? Let me see. So why? Let me make an image, and then if I go to save as, there should be a color space setting in the save as setting. That's super nice. What else? Previously this was chosen automatically. Again, AI. Too much AI. No, don't. Now it's possible to save, for example, a linear image as linear ACS. Nice. When changing the image, the file format, the color space is automatically changed to an appropriate color space for the file format. So if you're saving a JPEG, you probably want a different color space than if you're saving an OpenEXR. Or, yeah. This already happened before, but there was no visibility or control in the operator settings for this. So now you have, now you see what is happening. That's super cool. Don't change the color space when using the save operator to save or even to save over the same file. Gee, that's evil. It used to, now it's good. And the last one, fix missing color space conversion for 16-bit PNGs where it wrongly assumed image buffer to rect would be used for saving. Okay, more of an internal change. That's super cool. Thanks, Brecht, for working on this. That's a big change. I think this is even in 3.2. How can I know? Maybe I can go to Blender, branches, 3.2, and crash fixes. Crash, look at the amount of fixes these people have been working on. Even during the weekend. Wow, look, Brecht committed on Sunday. Do you know how the weather was on Sunday yesterday in the Netherlands? It was sunny, it was amazing. And people are making your Blender more stable. I'm gonna drop a tear here. So nice. And I can't find, maybe the color management, it's not part of 3.2, but it's in 3. Or maybe it is, I'm just not going fast enough. Color, no, it's in 3.3. Okay. The last, no, actually not the last. Have you noticed recently, in the last few weeks, that selecting a node was harder? I don't know, like select and moving a node. Have you noticed? I ran into this. I didn't know if it was my tablet, my mouse, my Linux, my what? My Wayland, my X11. No, it was just that there was, you know, some time ago, the sockets, the labels, the items in the nodes can now receive tooltips. But this change, adding the tooltips, made it so the labels in the nodes would behave like they could be dragged. So they were like swallowing the drag events, and or quick click or swallow the drag events. So it was very annoying because if you had a node and you wanted to grab it by here, like geometry to move, this wouldn't work. Now it does. Now you can do it. Before you have to click and drag in the header, which was very annoying. But now this works. Yay for that. And the last but not least, for the macOS users, you probably ran into this many times. I've seen people, every person using a Mac here at the studio, I noticed in the sequencer editor, there were green lines. Like you didn't want that. Unless you had an image that was green lines, unless you were editing the matrix in Blender, you probably wouldn't want that. Oh, there is even a video of the issue. Ah, no, this is a lag issue. This is something else. But yeah, there was basically these artifacts. There's no image, but they were like, yeah, green lines. Not fun in the sequencer. Now it has been fixed. So yay for that. macOS users, you can go back to use the best video editor available on Mac, I bet. Final Cut, DaVinci, Sequencer, if you sequence editor. Or at least the best editor that allows you to edit scenes, Blender scenes. Very specific. Okay, that is all for the news of this week. I think we can jump or walk slowly, take our time, to the questions of the day, which I didn't mention, but you can go to Blender.Today and ask questions that I will try my best to answer. Let's see. By the way, I'm also reading the chat. Let's see. I watched The Matrix on last weekend, and it was actually pretty good. Better than I expected. So nice. And the week before, I binge watched all the other three. It's amazing. So still 24 comments. Okay, I better stop talking about films. And let's answer some of the questions. Okay, let me jump to the other side. And Let's see. A ver. Vielvena, the first question. I'm going to answer the top ones because I have the votes. There have votes. In previous videos, you said that soon comes some news about the viewport compositor. Yes, there are branches related to that. There was a blog post coming planned for that week when I mentioned it, but going through it, and it needed a few fixes, a few tweaks. Also, the scope of the project has changed a little bit and it needs more. It's being worked on. If you here, temp viewport compositor merge. That is the magic word that you care about here. Merge. That means when it gets merged with master. So the fact that there is work being done here, super exciting. So yeah, expect news eventually. Rulen Nicolas says, hello Pablo, hope you're doing great today. Thank you, I hope you too. I just want to know if you have any news from the physics nodes project. Thanks for your time on the show. Yes, I have news, and you also have news because I've been talking about the hair project and that's the scope has changed. This year was supposed to be all about physics nodes, but the developers have decided that the hair should be tackled before because the new curve system was already being improved and improving because so basically geometry nodes uses mesh, right? And then curve support was added. Then the curve system was improved to make this curve handling in geometry nodes better. Then the hair in Blender has been end of life, so unmaintained for years now. So that also had to be tackled. So it went along really well with the new curve system. Then that needed more attention. That is actually taking the attention, the time from the core developers of geometry nodes, Jack-Luke and Hans. So that's what they are working on now. And they were going to work on the physics nodes project, but in discussing it with the team and the other developers, it made more sense to tackle first hair and then apply physics and solvers, node solvers and stuff after to as a new project, but could work with hair, could work with meshes, could work with objects and stuff. So it is still in the back of the developer's head. It's just that the scope has changed to first tackle hair stuff, curve stuff in general, because I say hair, but you can do anything with it. Okay. Next. Sai VFX says, hey Pablo, in the last 2 years, from time to time, I ask you about this idea. Could somebody implement stylus UX, pressure sensitivity, and pen optimized interface elements and tools? While recently Blender has been improved with some touch features, this one might be a timely one now. Yes, I still think this would be cool to experiment with, to have pressure sensitive UI for dragging, for more gestures. You know, pens are super powerful. They just need a wheel. They just need to implement a little wheel here. But other than that, I think it would benefit tremendously Blender to have precision in another axis. Although I don't know who can work on that. As in the core developers, they are busy with other projects, but it could be it sounds like a very isolated project for community members to jump in. So whoever implemented the recent changes on the pen, tablet, touch, gesture, touchpad, trackpad, is it touchpad or trackpad? I think it's just the same, right? So community, please jump in. Hey Pablo, why was the Blender particle nodes abolished and its geometry nodes a replacement for that? How did the Blender decide on the vast server? Thank you. Why was the Blender particle nodes abolished and is geometry nodes a replacement for that? Particles actually is both made by the same, like abolished is like a big word, right? But it's the same developer. Like the Jack Luke was working on the particle node stuff, well, function nodes, then worked on geometry nodes. It's just a better fit. Blender in general needed a way to do more procedural mesh stuff, which can control points, and points are basically particles. There is point clouds as well, so it fits better in the overall design. So yeah, and eventually they will come back. I mean, once you have solvers and you can do with on points or on point clouds or on curves the same things you can do in particles. It's just all a bit of the same, right? Oops, sorry. The next improvement, Moko says, and it's already an answer. Let's see. Moko, hi Pablo, I am having a big problem. I hope to have a big answer. When I finish a project, the way I back it up, I pack resources in Blender and then unpack the resources. Problem is that this is if I have two different materials that have images with the same name. When I unpack the resources, it will just save one image, and in a big project it will not till it's too late. I will not know until it's too late. It would be nice to have auto rename internally like diffuse. I mean, this is a bug. That's really bad. Blender should never. No, that's a bug. Like they unpack resources. If you have two images with the same name, you should just add 001 or something. It's just yeah, that's a bug. That's for sure a bug. I believe it's just that. I mean, there shouldn't be a way for you to lose progress so quickly and so quickly, so easily, like without, yeah. Okay, next. But yeah, please, can you report it, or maybe check if it has been reported already and if there is a task about it? But it shouldn't happen. Thin Soldier says, hello Pablo, do you ever get annoyed by the editor? I get annoyed by GIFs that I can't stop. I think Firefox has a way to stop GIFs or something. Anyway, let me read without that thing blinking in my face. Do you ever get annoyed by the editor list closing because you put your mouse in the wrong place too fast? I don't really use that menu much often, to be honest. So I'm maybe not the right person to ask. I usually just use shortcuts like Shift F3 for toggling this editor, Shift F5 for the 3D view, Shift F6 for the graph editor, and then Control Tab for the dope sheet. Shortcuts are so much faster than that. If you want to go to the asset browser, Shift F1 twice, and there you are. Shift F2. Yeah, I'm not the right person to go about this. But yeah, when this menu is open, there should be an even on all sides dead zone, so that inaccurate mouse movements don't inadvertently close the menu before you can make your selection. Yeah, I don't know. Do you like having a dead zone around menus? It's just as bad as, oh, you mean here, if you go down. Okay, if you go too fast, like this. Because if you go here to the left, I don't know. I feel like if you block this area arbitrarily when this is open, it also will feel like it's stuck. Like it's, you know, one way or another, it's always gonna feel like it's stuck. So maybe there could be a delay. Right now it's immediate. The moment you leave, it maybe it could wait for like a half a second or so. Maybe you want to go back and forth. but not a dead zone that you've, yeah. But yeah, also I recommend using the shortcuts, super handy. Next, well, actually these are super recent. Let's go to the bottom, which are the ones that have been posted first. So okay, these are all. That's a long one. Slow Kid 48 minutes ago asked, hey, hola Pablo, I wanted to share. I like that everybody's saying hola. It's nice. Feel like home. Been a bit homeless recently. I wanted to share a thought about the current development of Blender. This is a personal impression after following the Blender development and its releases since 2018. For those who are new to Blender development, 2018 is when the 2.8 project kicked off, when the Code Quest project started. Blender 2.8 is actually from 2019, the actual release, but the project itself is since 2.5 was out, like 10 years more, 20, 10, a long time ago. But 2018 is when there was the development funding, the campaign to get money, to get a bigger place where to get developers in and work on 2.8. And I started making daily videos, and that brought a lot of people in. Okay, so as much as I love and admire how Blender has progressed in the last 3 years, I'm starting to... Why am I not wearing headphones? The glasses, there you go. I'm starting to notice a tendency, especially since the last year. Many new features have been introduced, but along with them, every new release comes out with bugs or regressions that sometimes are quite important and stick for an entire release. Most recent example, this. Let's see this. What is this? Image editor poor performance by textures with no dragging, maximizing the area. This still here is a known issue, and so this is here and this is lower. Yeah, that's very much slower. So it's a regression in performance. I feel despite a lot of people still argue that Blender development is going slow and we are missing a lot of basic features. Who says that? I mean, we are, but also we are improving. As in, Blender is improving a ton. That actually development is rushing a lot to the detriment of stability. Some newly introduced features cause regressions that then aren't solved, and even after 3 releases. Sometimes they feel not totally polished, and sometimes they change face, UI and workflow even more than once with every release. Now it's good that features can be improved even in the span of one release. And of course, the developers have to give a higher priority to bugs that cause crashes or make impossible to use Blender. That's correct. But sometimes I feel it would be better to have maybe less releases per year, or wait more before merging new stuff in master and focus on more time on polishing features. Closely watch out for bugs that they could cause, and more in general, give more time to new stuff to be tested out. As much as I would love to have light linking or multiple object property editing, I would prefer to wait more for something that's stable and won't need a fix in a new release the exact time is merged in master. I hope I didn't annoy you with such a long text and impression. Food for thoughts. Thanks for the time and all the hard work that you do. Thank you. Yes and no. I think it may feel like it's been rushed. One thing, like if there is one feature I feel it was not tested enough, I think it's Manta Flow. Other than that, geometry nodes, I think it's being a great example of good development together with the community. I wouldn't have changed anything around that. Yes, there was a big change in 2.93, which made it, which started with name attributes, then it went to fields, and then now name attributes are being added again. So that it's a bit awkward, but so people had to learn a new system halfway. But that was only 6 months after the first release that things have changed. So it's not, I mean, if you use Blender, if you get every release every time, or even if you follow here the news, yeah, you might run into this. But if you, for example, if people have only been using the LTS releases, 2.93 and 3.3 LTS, they would have never lost the named attributes in geometry nodes, because 293 is the last release to have them, and 3.3 will have them. So in that sense, that hasn't changed. The bug that you mentioned, it's actually related to a fix on to the work on the UV editor. Do you remember when was the last time that a new feature has been added to the image or the UV editor? I don't. There has been nearly no features, unfortunately, because it's super important. However, there has been a lot of effort going on in performance. So no new feature, but actually making faster, improving performance, because something that people ask a lot. And this can happen. This shows how hard it is to improve performance without messing up other areas of the code of Blender. So I think it works as an example when people say, don't add new features, work on performance. Things like this can happen. There is even sometimes libraries that Blender depends on, like, I don't know, there was a change recently, a patch in USD. The newer USD has issues with all the computer, all systems that Blender has to patch in order to make it work with older systems. That's another thing to think about. Yeah, I don't think some feature has been rushed. Like Cycles X has been worked on a lot before being added. Like it made it to 3.0, but it was working even in 2.92 or earlier, in a different branch. I don't know, which feature in particular do you think has been rushed besides Mantaflow? I think Mantaflow needs some love. The UDIM stuff, do you think UDIM works? Am I wrong? I mean, I don't use it as much as enough to find those issues, but let me know which one. Maybe name some, like give me 5 features that you think have been rushed. Because also there are more bug reports, yeah, but there's also more people using Blender. If you go to Blender.org, in the About section website, if you go to the list, for example, in there is no 2021 stats, but I know that there has been 18 million downloads, more than 18 million downloads of Blender in 2021. In 2019, like 2017, let's go here, 2017, it has been downloaded 500,000 per times, from a total of 6.7 million, 6.5 million times, and now there's 18, so 3 times more than 2017. Of course there will be more bug reports, of course there will be more testing. Yeah, it's a trade-off. Okay, sorry, I'm rambling and I don't even have that much time now. It's 6 o'clock. Let's do 5 more questions. Faku says, hi Pablo, I hope you're doing great. Thank you for the shows. I want to ask you, is hair nodes a priority now? Will the new hair system be more performant than the current one? Yes, it's a priority. Well, yeah, it's what the team we are working on. It's not hair nodes, it's curve nodes. So even better, because it works for hair and for regular curves. Will the new hair system be more performance? Yes, because it's using the new curve system, which is more ready for multi-threading and just more modern in general. Next, what happened with the performance improvement in sculpt mode Pablo Barro did a time ago? Did it make to the master branch? No, it didn't make it to master, but it's being worked on by the new sculpt developer. He's been working on Blender for years, but Joe Eager is working on that kind of stuff, and he has a patch about PVVH painting stuff. I think it's gonna take over that. Next, number 4, when will Blender add quad dyne topo support for multi-res because that can lead to great sculpting, being able to add new geometry without messing up the UV map, and being able to subdivide it to avoid problems that in topo users encounter. I don't think it's well, here Sin Soldier says, I know I saw quad dyne topo mentioned somewhere. Yeah, read what Thin Soldier said, because I'm not familiar if there's anybody working on that per se. Number 3, hello Pablo, happy Monday. Thin Soldier says, for people with multiple large monitors, I think it's an easy way to open editors in new windows will be useful. What do you think? Like shift click to open in a new window. Is Blender's multi-window support as good for like being for exposing that much? I mean, and instead of a shortcut, do you think like shift click and it will make a new window, and then so it will be like this, like doing this? I don't know. Could, but we don't do that anywhere else. I don't know how I would feel about that. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of overlapping windows. I think Blender's I mean, we support it in Blender, so it should be easy to access, I guess. I mean, you can already shift click on a corner of an editor to make a new one. So how is that different from the rest? It's just that it's a bit ugly, right? You get these things in the top, this window thing in the top. This is not Blender. This is horrible. But yeah, Blender supports it. But yeah, it's tricky though, because we don't do this shift clicking on menus anywhere else, so it will be an exception. Not sure about that. Number 2. I noticed that very many people making tutorials do not know about the essential set offset from cursor feature of collections. It would help greatly if it was also in a more logical and easier to find location, like the collection properties tab. Absolutely, yes. Wait. This is when you add an object to a collection, and then when you set the offset from the cursor. Yeah, but how would you... There is a thread already for anyone knowing. Does it belong there because it's related to... Well, no, yeah, it's the offset of the collection when it's instanced. So if you have that setting somewhere else, it's a tricky one, because it is related in a way to the object that you have selected. Yeah. That's a very interesting topic. I never thought about this UI, how it relates this collections panel, which is a bit weird. You know, it has a box inside of a box. It's a list, but you cannot sort, you cannot do much on it. It's a bit special. You can create new collections from here. Like, wow, you can add to a new collection, but the collection is not instanced in the scene. So it is somewhere here. It's in the Blender file for sure. It's just the object is in a collection that is not linked to the scene. That's also it feels a bit nasty in a way. I mean, it's illegal. It's legal. It can be done. But yeah, it's tricky. I never thought about this, how this UI plays now that there is this concept. Although this collection only shows, the collection option only shows when you have a scene, when you don't have the scene collection on. So moving some settings there has to be, it needs an actual proposal. So please make one. In the right click select. And the last question again from Thin Soldier says, do you think mesh objects should have an active element in the properties editor just like metaballs? Mesh objects have the properties for the currently selected vert edge face edges only available in the sidebar. Metaballs have properties for the currently selected ball in both the sidebar and the properties editor. I guess it's, well, metaballs is not the best example because metaballs are super weird on its own. Like, Did you know that if you rename a metavolt, it doesn't work anymore? Like they're name based. Like if I duplicate this thing here, but then I rename something else, the metavolt, then it stops working with the name. They're name based. How? Give me the weakest system you have. Okay, not so weak. Anyway, yeah, no, I think it makes sense, because for objects, you have this vertex data, right? That it only shows this vertex data. For edges, you have edge data and vertices data. For faces, you don't have face data here. What could you have? Like face, like shade smooth, maybe? And then you wanted to have it here for like active element. But this is mesh. I don't know. Although it would make sense. But again, it will duplicate things. And we already get a lot of comments from people mad of having duplicate settings in many places, you know, like tools and yeah. I mean, at some point it would be great if you can just have all the things here, right? This tab is called item. So item is very broad, right? Like you could just show the entire object data settings in here in the item, and it would actually kind of make sense, because it's the item that I'm working on, the active item and its surroundings. And also this menu is very empty by default, unless you have bones with custom props. But even then, I think, yeah, doesn't show. If I add a custom property, it doesn't show there. No, it's in the view. Not even. Interesting. Anyway, that is the last question. I am already past the time. Oof, already 10 minutes past. Okay, cool. I gotta call it a day. We gotta call it a day, because otherwise we're not gonna have things to talk about next week. Apologies for the questions that I didn't get to cover in this episode, but I hope I explained myself the best way to cover some of them. For me, it's time to go home and do the Spanish version of Blender today. If you know any Espanol speaker, Latin American, Hispanic, let them know that there's the same show but in Spanish. The name is the same, Blender Hoy instead of Blender Today. So I was very creative with the name. Okay, time to call it a day. Next week we should have news. I think it's gonna be pretty related, pretty much around the same than this week, because in terms of the amount of news, because developers again are focused on making 3.2 as stable as possible for the release that comes out in like 3 weeks, in no time. So let's test Blender, please, and report any bugs that you may find. Anything, just load all your old production files. Get that production file, a short film that you made in 2.9, open it in 3.2 and see how it works or how it doesn't work, and please report, because that's what makes Blender stable, and that's what makes Blender have less fix or corrective releases. All right, I made it a bit too long. Watch out for your ear holes, because in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Was it loud? No, it wasn't too loud. Okay, thanks for tuning in. I will see you again, same place, same time next week for another episode of Blender Today Live. Bye. Ciao. Arrivederci. Sayonara. Have a great week, everyone.